Welcome back to the Jungle Fever podcast. I'm Ethan Sargent. Ayden Crowley is here as typical. And Bengals fans, welcome to the offseason. It is January 5th as of this recording, and we are in the offseason for the third year in a row. And the Bengals sticking with the staff. They're sticking with Duke Tobin. They're sticking with Zach Taylor. We will break that down plenty and in detail later on. In today's episode, the Bengals did play a game against the Cleveland Browns yesterday on the 4th. Myles Garrett broke a record, I think. The Bengals lost. It kind of helped, but it also didn't really matter. It is what it is. We'll talk about that a little bit as well. We now know where the Bengals are picking in the 2026 NFL Draft, and that is pick number 10, just inside that top 10. So we will see what they do. There will be plenty of talent. It's the highest they've picked since the 2021 season where they took Jamar Chase. So a very intriguing set of things to discuss today. Obviously, I think the biggest topic of discussion will be that conversation around the people in charge, which we'll get to in just a sec. But hey, let's real quick talk about what we saw yesterday first. Obviously, there's only so much stock you can take in these games because they're late, and half of these guys' brains are in Cancun already. But um, the Bengals played their last football game until mid-August yesterday, which is a little bittersweet. I
Yeah.
could
Um,
personally, I'm going to be 100% honest. I could go a couple of months without a Bengals game if I'm being super duper for real. But they won't play until mid-August. They lost 20 to 18. Two defensive touchdowns for Cleveland. It's so interesting. The Bengals had three fumbles returned for touchdowns this year. All three of them were Noah Fant fumbles, which coinky dink? I don't think so.
a little bit unlucky, a little bit of just take care of the football. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals actually gave up 58 points on offense this year between pick sixes and fumble sixes and one safety. So a very interesting stat there. But yeah, again, the Bengals held the Browns to just 200 yards of total offense. Shador Sanders only had 111 yards on a 50% completion rate, and they still lost the game. You know, Joe Burrow had an okay day. I don't think he would say it was his best day. It probably wasn't his worst day either. I think he definitely played better in this game than he did in that first game against Cleveland, all the way back at the start of the year. Threw for three touchdown passes. Did have the very costly pick six, which was off a tipped ball, of course. But yeah, I mean, a
I
couple of
think Zach,
thoughts, Aiden. I'll
yeah,
toss it to you.
yeah, I think Zach Taylor said it best. For better or for worse, Zach Taylor said it best. This game kind of summed up the season. It was very fitting that how the Bengals lost this game. It was a game that I think that the Bengals dominated. If you look at a lot of the advanced metrics, I mean, I don't think this game was particularly close if you were watching the game, but then you sat there and you looked down at the bottom of your screen and you ask yourself, how is Cleveland ahead? How are they holding a lead? It's because the
I
Bengals
mean, if
competed.
this were a game that the Bengals like needed to win in any capacity, like my head would be on Jupiter.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah.
just so many little
Yep.
mistakes and
That
so
and
many.
Yeah. That's where I was
It's
trying to get to is like they just shot themselves in the foot time and time and time and time again. And you could probably chalk that up to it being week 18. You are 6-10 going into that game. You don't really care too much. Some of that is also just things we've seen throughout the season. And that's one of the main things that I kind of want to hammer home in this is that this front office and this coaching staff and this group needs to be honest when they look themselves in the mirror and when they
Mhm.
look at that record. Because you can talk yourself into saying that, we had a winning record when Joe Burrow was on the field. We looked like a competent football team when Joe Burrow was on the field. I think we're not that far away. But I think this season has showed you you are far away. There are
You got a
drastic
lot of work to
moves
do.
that need to be made.
Yeah.
And I think it all kind of culminated into this game. And of course, the defense
And
can't get a
I
stop
think
when they need it most for the game.
I think that's part of the reason why I'm kind of glad that this game ended like this in like a sort of sadistic way. Like I think it might shine a little bit of a light on the fact that, well, maybe things do need to change a little bit. Maybe the wins against a team that started Quinn Ewers and a win against a team that just fired their head coach about an hour ago,
Yep.
you know, isn't quite a barometer breaker in terms of where this team's at right now,
Right.
right? They have a lot of work to do. And as we're going to talk about here throughout the course of this video, they have the means to do the work that needs to be done this year. And there is a world where they could enter next offseason with just as high expectations as they've entered each of the last few years, right? When you have a quarterback like they do, and when you have receivers like they do, and when you have some of the talent that's on this team, there's no reason why they shouldn't be in that conversation. But here we are, 3 years in a row, right? No postseason. And they don't deserve to be in the conversation right now because of what's transpired over the last 3 years. So, um, you have to just kind of tip your cap a little bit to Myles Garrett. I think
Zach Wolf. Zach
I did
Wolf.
say this. Absolutely no shot that's a sack if this game means anything, right? Burrow would have tried. Garrett might still have got him, but Burrow would have tried a little bit harder to get out of that sack if this game meant anything. Instead, he just falls to the floor. It's not worth trying to, it's not worth doing a silly injury late in the season, especially with all the other issues he's had. Um,
Can I get
Jamar
this off my
Chase.
chest? Can I get this
Yeah,
off my chest
go
about
ahead,
this?
please.
Zach Taylor after the game
Oh,
and
I'm
Jamar
glad you brought
Chase
this up.
after the game complaining about the celebration that happened. That's such a loser move. Like, you just have to know this record has stood for a quarter of a century, and
Yep.
you have somebody who breaks it. And guess what? A meaningless week 18. I don't care what Zach Taylor says. We're fighting for our lives. Your lives died 5 weeks ago, dude. So I don't want to hear that. And it's just like, it's such a bad look. Like, you have to respect the moment. You have to understand that that is a monumental thing that just happened.
Big
And yeah,
achievement.
it sucks. It sucks that it happened against you, but it did.
Block better.
So it's just again just such a loser look. And I wasn't particularly happy with what Jamar had to say about it after the game either. Basically saying that,
Jamar had a
they
number of very interesting comments after this game.
which we'll get to. But it's like they'll let us like they'll let me celebrate when I get my 10th catch or something in the back end. Hey, Jamar, if you go out and break a receiving record or a yards record, if you break a Jerry Rice record, I'm sure the league will let you celebrate.
They stopped the game when Jamar broke the rookie receiving record in 2021.
Yeah.
Like
So
it's
it's just
happened
such
to
a
him.
yeah, it's but
And that game
unfortunately
was against Cleveland in Cleveland.
but unfortunately, as we'll probably dive into, and this might be a good jumping off point to get into
Sure.
the decision from the front office, it fits all too well with the man at the helm in Zach Taylor, who Mike Brown has decided to bring back along with Duke Tobin. And real quick, before we get into it, I just want to read this statement in full
Please
in
go
its
ahead.
total entirety, just so we can kind of process and soak it in. Mike, from the desk of Mike Brown. We came into the season with high expectations
Do you
coming
think,
off
hold
four,
on, do you think he wrote this or typed this?
neither. We came into this season with high expectations coming off
Syria?
four straight winning seasons with leaders in place that took us to the Super Bowl and two AFC championship games. We know this season has been frustrating and disappointing. The results fell short of our standards, and missing the playoffs again proves there's more work to do. Our focus is building a team that can consistently compete at the highest level with the goal of winning championships. After thoughtful consideration, I'm confident that Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor are the right leaders to guide us forward. They have proven they can build and lead teams that compete for championships. We trust their plan and expect to return to our desired level of success. We are taking a hard look at everything we do as we approach this offseason with focused determination to build a championship caliber roster that wins consistently. We are fully committed to delivering results that match the pride, passion, and expectations of this organization and our fans. Close quote from Mr. Mike Brown.
There you go. There's my thoughts on that as I so eloquently demonstrated. Um, I will say a couple things about the statement. Number one, this is the first time that Duke Tobin has explicitly been mentioned in a
Name
statement like
drops.
this. So, that kind of aura of him just being untouchable is maybe just kind of, I'm not going to say it's gone, but it's maybe just wavering a little bit. And then the other thing on top of this is that we will react to this in next week's episode. But on Friday, there will be a press conference with Duke Tobin, which is rare, Bengals fans. This doesn't a lot of, I think, honestly, it might have been a leaf out of Indianapolis's playbook. Right. The Colts, obviously, great start to this year, completely fell off after injuries and just a tough second half of the schedule. Obviously it's Ursay Gordon, the new owner there after the unfortunate passing away of Jim Ursay. She is having Ballard back, Steichen back, but they're going to stand in front of the podium, right? And I think that Mike Brown might have taken a leaf out of that book. Might have said, "Look, I think you have to." Right? I Duke Tobin is somebody that kind of has always just flitted behind the scenes. Now, I will say this. I would not be surprised if Duke Tobin gets promoted to general manager this year. Um, you can think whatever you want about that. This is a personal prediction. I'm not putting a love it or hate it tag on it. I'm just saying I think it might happen. It's been way too long. This team doesn't have a general manager. I think Duke Tobin could prove to be useful as a general manager, more useful than he is right now. Because you know what general managers can do? General managers can negotiate contracts. You know who doesn't negotiate any contracts right now? Duke Tobin. So maybe that's the catalyst to change that the Blackburns, and you know what I was doing there? I was looking at my money, all the 68 million of it hyperbolically in my wallet, and I was putting it back in because that's what the Bengals want to do this offseason. But maybe that's catalyst to change. I don't know. That's very
I,
optimistic, but who knows?
But the pessimist in me asks what realistically changes if that happens because the Bengals, there's about probably, I don't know, you could argue maybe five guys that they brought on defense into the building to try and help, whether that's through free agency or draft. I'm going to list the bottom five Bengals on defense according to Pro Football Focus. Are you ready for this, Ethan? Um,
Uh-oh.
DJ Slayton came in fifth. He was a new addition.
Yep.
Shamar Stewart came in fourth, draft.
Give him a
Demetrius
slight
Knight came
pass.
in third, draft.
He don't
Barrett
get close.
Carter came in second, draft. And the
He don't get
worst
close.
graded defender for PFF was number one, Oren Burks, free agent.
Oof.
So you brought in
He didn't
five
even play that
people
much.
this offseason, and all five are bottom five on the team. So uh, the part, and I agree with you about being more transparent, having a press conference on Friday. It feels like the organization feels the outside noise, which is important because that's the only way that they changed with Marvin, and that's the only way that anything else in the future is going to change is that if the fans truly get fed up with it. But the point that I find slightly interesting is that they're, quote, taking a hard look at everything we do as we approach this offseason. I hope they're realistic about that. I hope they're real. I hope they're proactive. Dalton Reisner is cleaning out his locker today, talking about how much he loves Cincinnati and wants to be here next year.
It's
It
the
was a
easiest layup
phenomenal
of the
pickup.
entire offseason,
It's
and
a
they'll brick it.
no-brainer. And the work for the Bengals needs to get done before the draft. There are major holes and major improvements that need to happen. I don't care if Ruben Bain walks through that door. I don't care if Caleb Downs walks through that door. Both great. They're not saving this defense. Stuff needs to happen before. And
Well,
I
you have
hope,
to you have to be aggressive in free agency.
yeah,
You probably saw me on my phone there. I just pulled up the free agent list, right? And obviously at the top of that list is the Cincinnati Bengal and Trey Hendrickson. I think that's probably your first order of business is to take a look at that and say, well, what the heck are we doing here? Right? There is a number of options here. Number one, Trey Hendrickson could potentially re-sign, but how willing are the Bengals to pay him that money, especially in a year after he just dealt with a number of injuries? Number two, they franchise tag him again, which we'll
Bengals
see
need.
how that would go over. And number three, um, they let him walk. They let him walk. And I think that number three is probably the most likely situation right now. Now, unless there is some sort of coming together with them and they renegotiate a deal, maybe like I'm trying to even think of something they would work out, like it probably wouldn't be able to be more than like 32 million per year, like a 3-year, $95 million contract. Would the Bengals give that out? Ayden shaking his head. I tend to agree
No
with him.
shot.
So I don't know. I think that's what you're looking at there. So I think Aiden's right. I think that's where we're headed on that department is just a clean break. We talked about that last week. I think it's just a clean break. Then you look at the rest of this list. I'm gonna skip the top of this list because there's no reason to even indulge in it. Um, but like some prospective free agent prospects, I think the Bengals could very well look at. DJ Reader reunion? Question mark. I've seen some rumors about it. I don't know how
Yeah.
much if he can stay healthy, right? He struggled with that in Detroit. Um, it's a possibility. Um, I tend to think that they're going to stay away from the free agent market. I think that they're going to like, and they do this all the time. I think they're going to pigeonhole themselves into taking a safety in the draft, which I would love them to do that anyway. But like, they're just going to be like, and they do this all the time. They're going to be like, oh well, we're just going to deal with that in the draft and not be proactive about it. Like I wouldn't mind like looking at some of these safeties in free agency. You know, Jimmy Ward is a free agent. Kevin Byard, even though he's old, is a free agent. You know, there are some interesting names. Cam
This is
Curl.
where I find the whole we're taking a look at our off-season process, taking a hard look at that. I find that verbiage interesting because it's like what realistically is going to change because we know how the Bengals like to operate in these situations, and it's kind of been status quo, and that's why Zach Taylor is still around. We really didn't even touch on that too
Yep.
much because we've known that this was going to happen for about 3 weeks now. I know a lot of the
Yep.
fan base is freaking out. That's official, but
It wasn't a shock to us.
Paul
If you
Danner
watched this
Jr.
show, you
Yeah.
knew. Like it wasn't
Yeah. Paul Danner Jr. has been on it. We've said our piece on that. It's just you're accepting mediocrity with him at the helm. It just is what it is. But you just look around the league and you look at these other franchises, and at this point, what we're up to six head coaching changes. It's the Browns, the Cardinals, the Falcons, the Giants, the Raiders, and the Titans, right? And some of those, like the Falcons, have they been absolutely god awful? No, but they have a different level of expectation for their team. And Raheem Morris is not hitting that expectation. And so they move on and they're proactive and they're trying to improve. And I'll be very interested to see what sort of changes get made this offseason for the Bengals. I
Yep.
think the issues are glaring. We talk about the defense, how it couldn't get worse from last year. It got
It
worse
did.
in every statistical category. I'm not joking. Points allowed per possession, touchdowns allowed, yards per play, yards allowed per possession, pass yards allowed per possession, rush yards per possession, yards per rush, sacks, interceptions, fourth down rate, EPA per play, success rate, all worse. Literally every single one was worse. So here we are. So
I mean, okay, so let's just put it out there now. It can't get any worse. Can
no,
it?
don't say that. Don't say that.
It can't get any worse. It
It
can't get
might
any
get worse.
worse.
I don't know.
I mean, I think one thing I do want to touch on is some guys that I think you're expecting some jumps from. Um, I really look along that edge front, right? Miles Murphy put together a very nice second half of the year. We discussed that. Shamar Stewart finally kind of had a couple of flashes there towards the end of the year. Had a sack against Arizona, had a couple of pressures yesterday against Cleveland, did have a sack in that game as well. Um, and again, the thing is, when you look, Miles Murphy is 24, which it's something you don't even really clock it yet. Trey Hendrickson had two career sacks at the age of 24. Miles Murphy has five and a half. Now,
We're talking
apples to
ourselves
oranges.
into Miles Murphy. Here we go.
But look, look. At this point, I don't know how controversial this is going to be. I don't know if I'm picking up Miles Murphy's fifth-year option. I It's a little weird, but I think I'm picking it up based on what you've seen in the second half of this year. He earned himself, I think, that fifth-year pickup in the second half of this year. I think he did enough, just about, but he
I
did
agree.
enough
I
to
agree.
get that this year. Kind of a similar situation to what they're doing with Dax Hill, right? I think you saw enough from Dax Hill, and I think Dax Hill has earned himself potentially a look at a new contract next year, which is we'll get to that in a second. TJ Turner going into a contract year, proactive. We
Right.
talked about New Year's resolutions, proactivity. Let's get after it with DJ Turner,
Yep.
right? I think this is a guy he talked about it in one of his exit interviews. He's like, yeah, I'm going to get with my agents. We're going to talk, right? I love that. Let's talk, right? let's at the very least have the conversation, right? Let's get things going, and we'll get to a point where at least there can be some form of conversation. And maybe again, Ayden keeps going back to that line of doing things a little differently.
I just hope
Got
it's
fingers
true. I
crossed.
just hope it's true. And that's why I'm going to be so intrigued for Friday because Cincinnati media and the beat writers are not going to let Duke get off easy because they never
Some of
get
them
to
might.
see Duke. So
Some of them might. Some of them won't.
this is your once every
It's a Super Bowl.
7 months that you get to talk to Duke. They're going to take advantage of it and they're going
Well,
to
I
ask
mean, you'll see
tough questions.
Duke in about a month at the scouting
Sure.
combine.
Sure.
But even with that, like you can't ask Duke some of these questions at the combine. You're asking Duke about players, right? You're not asking him about like you can really get into it. Here's a good segment. Ayden, you are in this press conference. You're a journalist. Give me a question. What would you ask?
Um, Based off of how the last 3 seasons have gone, what gives you the confidence that you are still the right man to be making
Mm.
decisions organizationally for the Bengals?
I like that. I also feel like that's a question that will get asked on Friday. I
Yep.
feel like that's a Paul Denner Jr. type of question, like where I just think like some of these guys will kind of press him a little bit. It won't be too much. They know their boundaries, but they'll
I'm
press
just
him a little bit.
I'm just curious, like what I just want to know their thought process. Like because again, it's the conversation we came to at kind of near the beginning of the episode. It's like you have to be honest about who you are as an organization, who you are as a team. And based off of how these last off seasons have gone, I don't know if they're being 100% honest. I'd love to hear where their head's at. Like what instills you confidence that you are moving in the right direction despite everything around you seemingly going the other way, right? That I'm curious about that. What's a question
I
that
mean,
you want
look,
to get answered?
we haven't even talked about this, but last night we saw just a crazy game in Pittsburgh, right, for the Steelers to go to the postseason. It's the first time Steelers have won the division since the COVID year, 2020, right? I mean, you look at that Steelers team top to bottom, and you're like, they won the division. Like, look, all respect to them, right? They did it. They won it at the end of the day. But like, is that team winning a Super Bowl?
No.
If they
Is
do,
that
I
team
already
winning?
told our good Steeler fan friend Cameron up. I told him I'd pay him $50. I have
Is that team
there's
winning a
no
playoff
other
game?
side for me on that bet. I'll, I'm
Yeah.
happy to.
Yeah.
They do it. I'll pay him the 50.
I think
But
that's one of the more frustrating parts about this year is just how open it truly was. Because there was a tweet that said that the AFC North is just the NFC South with better PR. I disagree with that.
I
I just think
disagree
that
with
they
that.
had a down year, which is rare, which is why this year was so infuriating because you don't get these a whole lot. Um, and so now I think next year, I mean, Lamar's going to be healthy. Who knows who's going to be the quarterback for Pittsburgh? Cleveland, can it get worse? Probably, but
Shador Sanders' QBR for the year was 12.6.
but all
That's the
that,
sixth worst of all time.
I didn't know that. All that to say, you assume that the division's going to be better next year,
Well,
and
Cleveland
it's
has that. We haven't even discussed that. Cleveland's hiring a new coach. Kevin Stefanski is
yep.
out. We don't have to spend too much time on it, but I like, can you
Kevin
up?
Stefanski's going to get hired within a week.
I was gonna say, can you feasibly upgrade from him? That's my big question for Cleveland. And then on top of that, you keep Andrew Berry, who I think has made some good decisions. I think this 2025 draft class probably saved Andrew Berry's job with how productive they were. Judkins had a great year. Carson Schweisinger might well be defensive rookie of the year,
He will.
right? They've gotten great Harold Fannin, a great pick, right? And even Shadur making plays. But you know, they they have to you have to realize now, like if you're a head coach, right? If you're a candidate, and this cycle, honestly, like, I think that might be part. It's probably not the whole reasoning. It's probably like a 2% inkling in the Bengals race. I'm not a huge fan of this coaching cycle. Like, there's not a ton of coaches that I'm like, man, I want like Ben Johnson last year, right? Like everybody and their mother was like, oh, I want Ben Johnson as my head coach, and shock and awe, he's a pretty good NFL head coach, right? Like, I don't really see that kind of slam dunk this year.
Hmm.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, It always kind of pops out of nowhere, right? But you know, I don't see that. And then if
Yeah.
you're Cleveland, right? The thing about Andrew Berry, I just talked about all the good things he did, right? Mr. Watson, big mistake, the freak, right? You can't like that is a job losing mistake, if we're
Yeah,
being
but
honest.
that came from ownership pressure more than
It did.
anything. I think the thing with Kevin
By the way,
Stefanski,
Haslam's press conference today was unbelievable. Just the stuff is said. The
I,
stuff.
I think the thing with Kevin Stefanski is like it was time for a new voice in the organization, right, wrong, or indifferent. I think internally Cleveland probably knows how good of a coach Kevin Stefanski is, and it's unfortunate that this is kind of how it had to end, but I think it was time. I think when you have the record that you have, no matter what the circumstances are, like you just might not be the right guy for the job. And it's similar actually, and that we can tie it back into the Bengals, like with the Zach Taylor conversation, right? And it's like in Cincinnati, you have to win with an arm behind your back. You just do, because of how the front office is set up, how free agents view Cincinnati, yada 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 yada. Okay, and that's people who are in support of keeping Zach Taylor will always point to that and just say, well, he's trying to do this with the arm tied up around his back. Okay, that's fine. I need a coach who can do it, and there might not be a lot of them out there, but I need a coach who can do it with an arm tied around his back. As convoluted and sad as that sounds, I think that's the harsh reality of where we are. And I think Cleveland's in a similar situation where you have to find a coach who can win in spite of the organizational roadblocks that are set up in front of you.
Yeah. And then I mean, what do you do at quarterback? Look, you can't win in the NFL without a good quarterback, and you can make look. Well, I get canceled for this maybe. Is Shador Sanders that guy? I don't know. Like I
Hey,
just
I'll tell you right now, no.
I just told you his QBR, right? He made a couple nice plays and he threw the wrist up. I got no issue with the wrist. I got an issue with the arm and him throwing the football because it don't look great. I got an issue with him holding the ball down at his side and getting strip sacked. That's not super smart. But um, at the end of the day, let's go to Baltimore. Does John Harbaugh potentially leave Baltimore? I could see it maybe happening. And does Baltimore have an interesting decision to make this offseason regarding their quarterback as well?
Lamar's not going anywhere. Like, there's no shot. This is not, and I forget who said this. One of our friends said it. I think it might have been Grayson. Grayson gets a shout out every week.
Grayson's
Um,
always on this pod. We should do that at some point. Some point in the offseason. We'll have a Browns fan on the podcast.
but this isn't the NBA. Like, quarterback is by far the hardest position to find in sports. They have it. And you might disagree with that based off of how the season has gone, but I would argue that Lamar was nowhere near 100% at any point this season. The closest we've seen him to 100% was last night, and he balled out. So they have the
And those
quarterback
two those
position
two
locked
deep
up.
balls to Zay. I
Yeah,
mean, the first play in particular, where he just that's
right,
class. That's MVP Lamar. Just
right.
getting
And
out of
so like
pressure, making a play.
you're not moving him unless it's kicking and screaming, which I just don't see happening. Harbaugh is an interesting conversation because you think about where that roster is and the amount of talent, and is he really maximizing that talent? Those are the kinds of conversations that you have to have in the building. I wouldn't be surprised if they just stay put because you can chalk a lot of the season up to injuries, but I think situationally Harbaugh has a lot of question marks. Particularly
Mhm.
his usage with Derrick Henry this season has been very bizarre. So I probably lean towards both of them being back. Lamar for sure being back. Harbaugh kind of but that I wouldn't be surprised if he's back.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess some quick logistical things to kind of look at. The coaching cycle has begun. I mentioned Cleveland fired their coach. I mentioned Arizona fired their coach. Vegas
Mhm.
has no coach. That's gonna that may
It's Brian Flores. That has Brian Flores written all
I'm
over it.
gonna say I think that might be the most attractive opening here. And I know it's kind of sounds a little weird, but you have the number one overall pick. You've
It's
got plenty of
Fernando.
talent,
It's
right?
Ashton
Brock
Jeanty. Brock
Bowers,
Bowers.
Ashton Genty. Um, Max Crosby, maybe or maybe not. I don't know. Maybe that's a potential trade candidate this offseason. We'll see. You've got Brady, right, running things at the top of that organization. It's an interesting opening to say the least. Um, Run me a couple more. I gotta try and
Tennessee,
find this.
Tennessee, and New York.
Tennessee and New York, right? Giants. I mean, there's
Atlanta.
talent on that roster for sure. It's just.
I wouldn't be shocked if New York calls Mr. Stefanski and says, "What are your thoughts on Jackson Dart? Would you want to come in?"
Yeah, I can see that. And then Tennessee's already interviewing Matt Nagy, Peyton Brooker through his controller, through a television.
The Matt
Um,
Nagy call. Oh my gosh.
I like you can't make that higher. If you do, just write them off. I feel bad for Cam Ward. He's the only one that looks like he cares on that roster.
Yeah.
So,
And
and
then
Simmons,
Atlanta.
Jeffrey Simmons. Yeah. So,
Atlanta's the sixth.
um, the NFL draft, the first 18 picks are finalized. Let's go through that. Obviously, I just mentioned that the Raiders are the number one overall pick. Jets come in at number two. Arizona's number three. Tennessee's number four. New York is number five. Cleveland is number six. Washington is number seven. New Orleans is eight. Kansas City is nine. The Bengals are, of course, at pick number 10. Miami is at 11. Dallas is at 12. 13 is Atlanta, but that pick is going to LA.
So
They might be coming off a Super Bowl. Who
that's
knows?
so
Baltimore is at 14 now. Tampa Bay is at 15. Indianapolis is at 16, but that pick is going to the New York Jets. So they've got two picks in the first 16. And then Detroit is at pick 17. Minnesota ends at pick 18. Minnesota kind of came out of nowhere to win their last like five games, and it doesn't matter at all. But they did win a lot of late season games. So,
yeah.
um,
Don't you find it interesting, this draft order? Does anything stand out to you about this draft order? I'm curious.
Um, I mean, a lot of playoff teams from the last few years are kind of near the bottom of this. Like missed the playoffs this year. Like I look at Detroit, who's been a perennial contender the last couple of years. Minnesota was a 14-3 team last season. Tampa Bay won the NFC South like a bunch of years in a row.
I was
The
going a different
last.
direction. I was saying, do you recall 2017? What happened? The
Oh,
Bengals lose,
I know where you're going.
and we go ahead of Kansas City. And it was that 9-10 spot. Who did we draft at 9?
John Ross,
Who went at 10?
Patrick Mahomes the second.
Maybe this is the universe making everything
So
right, and maybe
I
the
guess this is what we can
Chiefs
kind of spend
whip,
the
and
last like
maybe we hit.
5 minutes of this on. Um, you know, Obviously there's a lot of talent in this draft, right? Like I said this last week, I don't know necessarily if there's like a ton of generational players in this draft, but there's absolutely a boatload of talent, right? And you look at the teams that are drafting ahead of Cincinnati, right? Kansas City is at nine. Who knows what Kansas City's gonna look like next year? Has Travis Kelce played his last snap, right? Has Will Mahomes even see the field next year, right? There are real questions around Kansas City. Probably, I mean, well, absolutely for the first time in probably about half a decade, they have a serious, off-season questions to answer, like major off-season questions. And that roster, look, it kind of just fell apart down the stretch this year. Even if Mahomes doesn't get hurt, they weren't going anywhere anyway. So it's very interesting offseason for Andy Reid and company. You've got New Orleans at eight. Have they found their quarterback and Tyler Shugg? What does that leave them to do in the draft? And then Washington at seven, Jane Daniels, a lot of injuries in year two. And then obviously you look at the top of this draft, Vegas likely quarterback. I imagine New York likely quarterback. And then it probably gets into the real draft. Arizona, I'll say this, could be interested in quarterback. Don't sleep on it. Because Kyler Murray played his last snap as a Cardinal. I wouldn't say no
Yes,
necessarily.
yes, he did.
So then Tennessee obviously is the first team where they're not interested in a quarterback, right? Giants at five. We'll see how much. I mean, I think that Dart did enough this year, I think, to earn another year with them. And obviously, you're going to get Scatterboo back. And then Cleveland at six. Who knows with them? So you probably, if you're the Bengals, you want as many quarterbacks off the board before you, right? You want teams to go QB because that's one more slot down for your Bain and your Downs and your David Baileys and your Peter Woods and all that.
But realistically, looking at the board, I mean, like there's going to be two quarterbacks taken in the top 10.
Mendoza.
No matter who's drafting, it's going to be Dante Moore and it's going to be Fernando Mendoza. Um, Assuming Dante Moore comes out, but I'm pretty safe to assume at this point that he's going to come out. I guess unless he doesn't want to be a Jet. But like realistically, like nobody else really on that board is going to take a quarterback. Like Cleveland probably wants to think about taking a quarterback, but you can't
Do
talk
you
yourself.
think Cleveland runs it back with four at the start of next year?
No, no.
It like,
I think
am
they
I
bring
crazy
in
for thinking it's even a possibility?
a little bit. I think they bring in competition. Whether that is a Malik Willis, whether that is a Jacoby Brissett,
Bring back Joe Flacco, round
or
three.
or if it's if it is a Kyler. But I think they bring in competition that way and have him compete with Shador. But you just can't realistically talk yourself into taking a guy like Trinidad Chambliss. As much as we love Trinidad at 6, that feels a little steep. A guy like Carson Beck at 6 feels steep. So realistically, you're
I
looking at
hope
two.
they do that.
Realistically, you're looking at two quarterbacks off the board in the top
Yeah,
10.
so I guess this is way too early. Well, this is how we'll end this. Bengals pick at 10. Go.
What I want or what I think is going to be the
We'll do
pick?
both. We'll do both. We got enough time to do both.
Oh geez. Oh geez. I wasn't prepared for this. What what I think is gonna happen and what I hope is gonna happen will be the same because I'm positive. Give me either Amari Washington out of Oregon. Be on the
I
lookout.
like
He's
him.
gonna be a big riser throughout the process. Either
Big
him,
fella. Big dog.
a big fella, or Peter Woods. I just think a pass rushing three technique is necessary for this team. That's where I would go.
Okay. I think I want, because here's what I think is going to happen. I think the Bengals are going to shoehorn themselves into taking Caleb Downs. Of course, that now comes into that's who I want, right? Number 10, Caleb Downs. Kansas City's there at 9. S. Caleb Downs, right? And everybody will go crazy when that happens. And then what do you do? So I think that in response to that, the Bengals would take David Bailey out of Texas Tech. Athletic freak. Is going to test really well, but also has the production to match. Just watch the Oregon game and a game that Texas Tech got shut out in, just
My
against
only
elite
question,
competition
I agree with you. My only question to that would be, do the Bengals take three edge rushers in
in four
what would
years.
that would be
Would
three
you
edge
would you
rushers in 4 years?
realistically put it past them?
No, no,
Hmm.
but like that
I'm also like I'd be thrilled with the Dave Bailey pick. I think you would that's another thing because I think Joseph Osai could very well walk. And then you would have a realistic opening, right? So
I hope
and then
they
I
make the
think
decision all on.
in that case there is a potential spot if Bain is there. If you take Ruben Bain and a lot of people want him moved inside because of the arm length, that could be a realistic move for him. But we'll see on that. So plenty more discussions like that coming up over the next few weeks and months. Don't worry. But we're going to talk more next week. We'll react to this Duke Tobin presser. I'm sure it'll be filled with joy. So, but that'll do it for this week's edition of the Jungle Fever Pod. For Ayden Crowley, I'm Ethan Sargent. We will see you next week. More off-season talk coming soon.